Welcome to Cleanup, the restoration industry podcast. Today, we're going to talk to Noah from Ark Remediation on how he focuses on the middle in order to make more money and grow his business. Well, Noah, I want to say thanks for joining us today on the Cleanup Restoration podcast. Let's begin by just jumping right in. Noah, tell us a little bit about your business and how you got started in this world.
The name of my business is Ark Restoration and Remediation Services Incorporated, but pretty much my DBA has just been Ark Remediation. I started with Stanley Steamer in 2004, and my background in cleaning kind of stemmed from that, and I was with them for a bit, and then transferred over to full-on restoration. Services for Ark stem from consulting, estimating side of things, all to assisting and facilitating restoration and remediation or mitigation and remediation services for other restorers and insureds.
Interesting. So, what areas do you work in mainly, Noah, as far as geography-wise? What type of geography area do you guys cover?
Right now, I'm working most of the work is coming in remotely into Florida, but I'm working on through some of these public events and networking circles to expand to more national, even international within the next year or so.
Oh, wow. So are you, help me understand that a little bit, Noah. So when we do that, are you working directly on those jobs? Are you working as a consultant or a guide for other remediation companies and restoration companies? How does that work if, I'm not in your area, so to speak?
It's gonna stem from the smallest thing to where I go in and can be a hand holder and work through a company's first large loss out there, and this is how you're walking it, this is how you need to break it up, to actually being the actual contractor on there. Currently working on becoming a flooring inspector. So there's a lot of that's local, but through a couple of instructors, there's some international work with the inspecting side of it. But I want to make sure that I'm also reaching out education-wise as well, that it's not just a physical service all the time, that there's going to be some training and education to a lot of what I do.
Well, that's fantastic. So there'll be that opportunity if I'm running a restoration business now and you've got a specialty that maybe I don't, you can help us land those jobs, bid those jobs, work through those, and we can basically partner together to be successful. And is that a correct understanding of what I'm hearing there, Noah?
Correct, or at least within the network of people that I'll be working with, that I have a specialist. If it's not within my wheelhouse, I want to make sure that everything that I do, that we can't be told no by a client or carriers, but at the same time that I don't overstep, and that I have the person that's needed to be able to be there to be spoken with.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, what a great idea. I love that. And I certainly can see the value in that across the board. So as you've been building your business, Noah, one of the things I always love to ask is, talk to me about a difficult lesson that was learned or a difficult experience that maybe you have had to deal with. And how do you overcome that in the business? Any advice you can give to other restoration company owners on, again, how to handle a specific situation maybe that you've run into?
A lot of it is going to be the humility in this business. I've been doing this almost 20 years. I'm probably about 2 shy now at this point. And it's the humility part of it. It's either restorers and contractors don't have it, or there's too much of it, and you'll lose the job. So on both ends, during projects, not understanding your scope of work, and just working through your start to finish ideals will ruin ruin a project and your profits, and damages to your overhead for sure. So I would guess humility both on the positive and the negative side of things.
Oh, I think that's really good advice. That actually reminds me of a poll I read recently talking about how, particular in the restoration industry, one of the customer complaints is the proverbial pushy salesman, the salesman that shows up on site, has got a contract there. They just want to get your signature on it. They're not really telling you much. They're just pushing you to, sign this contract, sign this contract, sign this contract. And it really sounds like your perspective is a bit more consultative in that process, and certainly a part of educating the client as you go along to help them understand what's happening. Would you agree that pushy salesman role, while it's certainly in the industry, we know that, may not be as effective as some people think?
I think what's going on currently with our industry is we've had a lot of the used car salesman type
Hmm.
aspects to everything. Is, we're going to put you in this, and it's going to be great and you're going to love it. But that's not actually how the process works from start to finish. And I think we kind of need to remove ourselves from that side of things. And like you were just stating, is moving into more of a consulting side of the things with the actual insureds or your direct client to that property. Whereas a contractor is going to it's going to be more business development side of things than consulting, because for me, consulting seems to be more of a point and click type of thing, which is what an insured or a layman um, type of consumer is going to need, whereas a contractor is going to need to be delegated more into the lane in order for him to be successful, rather than a point and click. It's going to be a lot more on the back end for a contractor than it would be for an insured or property owner.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. That brings to mind, I know part of being successful in the industry is learning the best way to upsell your customer when you're in there to get them to, invest in additional services that add value to them. What have you found to be some of the best ways to convince your customers when you're working with them of some of the additional services that you offer without, again, coming across as that used car salesman?
So when I was with Stanley Steamer, I still to this day believe in their products. I buy them for my home and use them. I believe in everything that we have standards wise in the foundation in this industry. I think we actually miss out on a lot of additional services for clients during the actual projects, as well as follow-up services to make sure that they're put back to pre-loss conditions in order to rectify what's going on at the property for them.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting. Taking a step back a little bit, Noah, and thank you, by the way, I appreciate the answer to that. What caused you to get involved in the industry up front? I know, where we regularly talk to people that are looking at getting involved in the restoration business or have recently gotten involved. And I love to hear some of the stories about what originally drew you. You mentioned you've been in the industry for many years. What drew you into the industry at first?
Funny story. I actually was working in the back office at Washington Mutual doing research for account errors. And I grew up in construction. I did concrete demo and lawn maintenance, so I was more blue collar, and wanted to make a change and was looking to get into management actually. And Stanley Steamer had a position open for quality control manager. And as soon as I got in and got to meet everybody and did some shadowing on the trucks with the technicians, and the education that I was given, I fell into it, but ended up falling in love with it as well. And this industry has been
Oh, that's
amazing for me and my family.
that is a great story. I appreciate you sharing it. Not every day, obviously, once we get involved, is a great day, and there's days we wonder why we. I'm sure we all wonder why we did that. What keeps you motivated now after being in the business for so many years?
That's a kind of a twofer. It's one, I want to make sure that there's contractors and businesses and locals that continue to have that sense of standard and professional care. as my kids grow up and run into these situations, hopefully not more than they need to. But also, I'm changing gears, not just with the company, but with myself professionally, moving into more education and training. And we need more involved and dedicated and passionate and excited individuals. And I don't see me stopping anytime soon. So it's what wakes me up in the morning. Um, Going from checking emails to Facebook, see who's done what, who needs what, and seeing how I can either be a part of it to physically handle the situation, or to where I can facilitate it to somebody else I know or someone that's relatively responsible that I trust.
It sounds like a big part of your business then really has turned into being that, what I would call that integrator, the person that can look at a situation and determine what resources are needed. Are they resources you've got? Are there resources in your network? And helping to make sure at the end of the day that customer's been taken care of, got a quality job performed at a fair price, and always taken care of well, as opposed to taken advantage of. Thanks for sharing that.
That's absolutely, you hit it right on the head with that. It's we're missing the middle process of our projects, and anybody that's in or looking to get into, your heart and soul needs to be in the middle part, because if you do it right, the money will be there. You just need to have the proper setup, and then the process and procedures during.
What would you recommend? Obviously, you've got a lot of experience, and not everyone watching this will. What do you recommend as some of the best ways to get started creating those processes and procedures, so that you as an organization can provide a consistent and repeatable experience to your customers? Is there any recommendations on the best way to start with some of those processes?
Yeah, starting on the cleaning side, any informal or formal education that you can get on the proper cleaning processes, and how to basically break surface tension of a material in order to clean it and get it back to pre-loss is the biggest thing. A lot of guys that get into the industry, understand that you can set it and forget it with equipment, uh, but there's so much more. There's so much science to it. It does get really involved. Um, so whatever they can do, kind of on their own, as an individual coming up, as a technician, getting into management and stuff, starting from that end, I've taken care of 3/4, if not more, of my own education out of my own pocket over the years, because it's so vital. We have a lot of OJT, we have a lot of the physical stuff, but we don't have a lot of um, real formal education or training that's impressed upon us. Uh, because on the restoration side, the mitigation portion of it, all you have to do is just have a business license and be insured, but you don't have to have any licensing or credentials to continue doing any of the mitigation work. But as soon as you switch over to your remediation side, to your microbial side, depending on the state you're in, you have to have state license. You have to have microbial certifications, and we're missing a lot of the steps in creating consistency and base foundation standards, because no one's taking heed of the amount of education that we need. But we're missing the physical part of it, because we got the cool OJT where everything's tips and tricks from everybody's experience, but we're not applying it to where we can create some consistency with that, and that it stays in line with the standards that we already have, both nationally here in the U.S. and internationally through other countries.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Thank you. You mentioned the employees through some of that, and some OJT, on the job training, things like that. Obviously, in today's economy, getting and keeping employees, it can be difficult. Any tips that you might recommend, or things you found successful in either recruiting the team members you need, or keeping the team members you've got on board?
I've kind of actually I've gone to a portion of thinking of where we need to not involve necessarily all people that are capable of physically doing the work, but going to more of the people that can mentally handle the work. I know
Mm-hmm.
probably about a decade, if not two, ago, when I was involved with Coconut Creek Police Explorers here in Florida, they changed from their requirements for officers to have criminology into requiring that they have math and science. So working to get more critical thinkers that have more common sense, that are able to get detail and orientation in a very chaotic situation very quickly, and be able to have consistency with that and be able to run through the entirety of the project, as well as assist others during it, is really what we're needing, because we're having a lot of the guys that are capable of that go to a lot of large loss situations and storm chasing. So once these guys either go out of town or they get stuck on projects for months and months, even years, we start losing that capacity of the proper residential contractors and restorers to be a part of it. And we're learning, we're leaning on guys that are really great at carpet cleaning but can't transition over, or even contractors that are great at builders and can't transition over, because the restoration is a completely different beast. When you break it down, it's simplistic. Everybody can stay in their lane. But when you have to actually involve and think about all of those avenues that you have to go down in a singular project, residential or commercial, we're losing a lot of the critical thinkers on the residential side. Once these storms start popping off, and even regularly, because these guys are so used to commercial that they're not really paying attention properly to the residential. So education is big, and as soon as you can start it and really working into having a OCD detailed mind.
Excellent. Really good advice there. I appreciate that. And I think that's, again, something that a lot of times we miss. We look so much for the hard skills and not the soft skills that can work long term. So I think a great share there. Thank you so much. Noah, a little bit more back to you and the company. What are you using in your marketing and your when you're talking to people? What makes you the person that I should come to when I need services? In other words, why should I choose Ark Remediation over somebody else in the industry? What sets you guys apart?
It's tough because a lot of the facets of what I provide, everybody says that they can. And as a single owner, and I have two employees that are my of age children, we provide a service that no one else can. Not only is it just experience, but I care and I have humility. So if I'm ever wrong, I'll be able to, take it as a learning curve to that company. But I won't back down, and I won't take no for answers, because there's so much that we're missing on our scopes of work. Everybody wants to put a dollar amount to it. Well, I want to make you understand that the scope of work that you do, what you touch, what you see, what is going on. If you look down, up, all around, that's your project, and how you manipulate that and produce a scope in order to get it to pre-loss conditions is the entirety of what's being missed. Everybody wants to just sign a project and then get paid for it, but no one really thinks about what's coming in the middle. And a lot of other professionals out there, we're missing that largest step in everything. I just spoke to a client yesterday that came to my property and met my family, and I explained this to him. You're always quick into the job, but you're always late to bill, and that's because you rush in to set everything up, to get everything going, but everything is not in place in order for that final invoice, that
Mm-hmm.
estimate after all of your rounding off numbers and whatnot. That's where everything needs to be happening, is right in that marker, from your, that after that 15% of signing the job to the 15% of you closing it. That 70%, 70 to 80% that you're working in the middle is not being resolved by a lot of the companies. Everybody will fight a supplemental, and they'll fight whatever you give them afterwards, but we're not being proactive. And if we produce proactivity during the job right after we sign it and get that trust, we'll have it at the end, and we won't have a lot of the issues that a lot of these contractors and restorers are dealing with. We can, excuse me, I apologize. We can really address this head on with the proactivity of it instead of us being so reactive. We're so proactive on drying a home out and getting there and doing it, but we're not proactive in making sure that our documentation is there and providing that to the carrier before they ask for it. And our industry has changed so much over even just the last few years, but a bulk of it in the last 5 that no one's really addressing. I mean, there's top tier addressing it, but from kind of the ground up companies where I'm at and my position right now, the guys that are offering the same services that I am are not keeping up with what's missing in projects. They're just trying to maximize each claim.
Oh, it's so good. Thank you. It reminds me, I had a conversation the other day with another gentleman in the restoration industry, and they were really talking about one of the key things that the industry seems to miss in many cases, not always, but in many cases, is understanding how to work with the insurance companies in order to maximize the revenue for the restoration company. Would you say that that understanding you talked about, making sure, for example, the insurance company's got the paperwork they need before they bug you for it, making sure you've got that validation, those proof points, and even understanding how those insurance companies are working so that you can maximize the opportunities for your business? Are those all things that are becoming more important, or do you think less important to owners in the industry?
I think that's kind of a twofer as well.
Okay.
Over the years, we've gotten to a point to where we were having a hard time, not necessarily marketing, but getting into the carriers because of our AOBs, at least in Florida and a couple of other states. Not necessarily that they were being abused all of the time, but the amount of power that you had with an AOB. So a lot of laws have changed. Carriers have put in a lot of guidelines for us, which is tough because their guidelines are not in favor or in suit of the contractors that are doing the work, nor are they in line with the standards. They prevent us from doing a lot of things that we need to because they want to keep projects as non-invasive as possible. And then it becomes a problem not only with the carriers, but then as we set up these projects and bill them for, we're going then to the client, which is our actual point of payment and should be. But when we're working with these claims that someone doesn't have, $50,000 to shell out, we work with the insurance companies. But it's gotten so bad to where they've now set up TPAs, which are third-party administrators, to basically peer review our invoices before they get in there. And you wouldn't argue a plumber's bill or a mechanic's bill or a doctor's bill, but we're finding a lot, especially over the last 5 years, that where it's changing and it's not understood from either side on why this is happening logically. We're seeing as they want to control the inflation of the bills or what's being shelled out to certain contractors. So they're trying to put controls on us, and we should be able to be restorers in our industry. But between the caps and whatnot that they've been playing, we're having to alter the way that we work, which then complicates the actual line of events that's supposed to happen within a claim. And it becomes an argument, way too soon, way too fast, and way too aggressively that we need to step back, and everybody kind of needs to have a meditation moment before we can continue to converse moving forward with bringing in, more contractors to the industry and properly educated.
What's your recommendation, Noah, when you run into problems like you described with the insurance company, and it seems like every move you make, they're set to follow up in one way or another. Any recommendations or things that you found effective in working with those carriers to make sure that in the long run, the property owner is getting the value that they deserve?
I work really hard on the scope of a project rather than a cost of it, because if I'm working the scope of the job, then the money should be there based off of everything that goes on. But they do have situations where that cost in that line item is not going to be there, and you either have to put in additional labor hours or material cost. But understanding the scope and working with the carrier to understand what the scope is, because everybody pushes standards or everybody pushes regulations, but again, we're not really pushing the middle part of the job and how that information is supposed to be transcribed into the scope of work to make it functional, and for us to get to that point to where we can have our final bill, and everybody, even though cost is always going to be a concern, that the scope was reached, and that in the end the client will be pre-loss, will be indemnified for our costs incurred, and the insurance company knows that the contractor that was used, whether they're on a program or not, this is potentially somebody that can go back to, that we don't have to argue. This is their scope. They're not fluffing it. Let's have this conversation again and see if we can get them on a contract.
Oh, awesome advice. It really sounds like so many things that communication is just a huge part of that success, and also about being more profitable as a company as well. You said specifying that scope and stuff makes a huge difference in moving forward. Well, I think you shared some amazing advice here today, Noah, and I really appreciate that, especially your focus on that middle part. I love the 15% up front and 15% closing it, but that 70% in the middle is where we all need to do more work. Um, with that in mind, one question I love to ask everybody, and you may or may not have a story, but do you have any good bizarre story of anything you've run into before that maybe you only ran into once, was super unique, or just yeah, any story like that at all that you could share with us from a unique experience perspective, Noah?
I had an adjuster, and it was the first one that I ever had, and it was just after I'd gotten my independent adjuster's license. And I typically don't like to be told no. I want to understand why a project's not going to be covered, or why we're having issues with billing. This one, the gentleman had worked for like 10 years for as a project manager for a restoration company, and I never had a really intelligent conversation with the other side. And this was probably at about 10 or 12 years of being in, and it got to a point where it was getting educationally aggressive, and we were kind of not yelling, but we were talking loudly, giving information to each other, and I had to stop the conversation, and I said, listen, we could keep going back and forth. I don't want to turn this into a pitching contest. I'm a licensed adjuster. You've done restoration before. This is now our positions where we are now. You're in the adjuster. I'm the restorer. What do you need to get this back? And he kind of just explained, rebutted back that, based off the time frame and everything else, that mold can't grow in this. And I said, well, those are lab conditions. Unfortunately, I didn't stay with the company to see the end of the claim, but that project, almost up until I think like the last day I was on it speaking with the adjuster, and it just was weird that everybody refers back to lab conditions instead of working real life conditions, and that it always has to be a fight. That we need to come down to where we're all human, we all make mistakes, we're all here to make justifiable ends for all of this, but it really needs to be working to pre-loss conditions and satisfying the insured and making sure that that policy is satisfied. That's kind of where my crazy story came from, and what kind of pushed me into diving into a lot more of the crazy stuff of what goes on in our industry than just keeping it normal.
No, I want to say thank you. It's been great chatting with you, and we look forward to just chatting again soon. So thank you.
It's been awesome, Jonathan. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it and look forward to working with you guys coming here soon.